What's up everybody, it's Robin Gaming here. So, following of course the sad news that Visceral Games will be closed and that the Amy Hennig Star Wars game is sadly not going to be continued, at least in the way that it was, of it being a linear single-player blockbuster type game, Cory Barlog, who is the God of War director, he took it to Twitter and he talked a bit about this whole discussion that has recently really started again about, are single-player games, especially the linear ones, slowly dying off, or in what direction really are they headed? And so he shared a bit of his own concerns and opinions, I guess, about linear single-player games. So I'll quickly read what he says. He says, I love linear single-player games. It saddens me when the word linear is considered a bad thing. You can have agency in a linear story game too. And I guess I wanted to really quickly, of course, talk with you about what I think about that. Obviously, well, I'm the leader of like the linear single-player game Defense Force. So clearly, I support everything he says, and I'm glad that somebody is standing up, somebody of influence in the gaming industry who is speaking about it. I absolutely also can't wait for the new God of War game. I gotta say that. I mean, I love the direction that they're going into. So clearly, I'm a huge fan of what exactly is coming up from Cory Barlog, and so it's good to see him speak about this once again. But I wanted to really quickly talk about that, right? Of course, we see nowadays, and I've talked a bit about that already in the past few videos, but open world games and multiplayer games are becoming much more of the standard. We're seeing more and more of them come out simply for the reason that gamers are buying them more, and because of that, companies are making more money on them, right? I think as far as single player goes, you see more and more that gamers start complaining that, oh, I need to get at least like 50 hours out of my video game because that way I get more content, and so my $60 purchase is worth it more, or at least they really feel that way, right? And that's why we see in the single player department, we see the open world game really taking off more and more, right? At the same time, as far as multiplayer games goes, well, they have always been popular for the fact that, yes, once again, you can put so much time into them. Like, you can play them for hundreds of hours, really, if you want to. But at the same time, I think what developers really like about those type of games is the fact that they can sell you DLC much more easily, and microtransactions, season passes, all this type of stuff that, because you're going to be playing the game more, you're going to want to invest more money into it too, right? And that's why, once again, we've really seen both of these genres taking off, multiplayer games and open world single player games. But that also means, and we have seen this, it cannot be denied that linear single player games are becoming less and less relevant, and that really saddens me to see because I love those type of games, right? And they're honestly my favorite genre really in video games. Now, what Cory Barlog here said about the fact that, you can have agency in linear story games too, I agree with that. At the same time, I don't really understand, once again, why people want that agency so much. That seems to have been such a big thing that you see online people talking about, right? Like, oh, I want to have choices in my story. I want to make sure that I can affect the ending that I get, or that, I can choose out of a list of activities to do, and I always have my own say in what do I want to do next. But for me personally, when I look at it, right, and I look at these linear single player games, what I actually love about them sometimes is the fact that I don't really get that much agency, but that they can tell me a great story that I just don't see coming, that I don't really have too much influence over, because, like, that's why I watch movies too, right? Or that's why I watch TV shows too, is because I love seeing a story played out that I can really experience that way. And I think that, speaking about that, there are some clear advantages that single player, especially linear games, have over the typical open world games and stuff. And so I wanted to really quickly talk to you about those. Basically, there are 4 points. I wrote them down here on my phone. The first one is that linear games generally have a better story than open world games. There's always going to be, of course, exceptions in this thing, but generally speaking, once again, linear games have better stories than open world games. And why is that? Because they are more focused. So the developer knows what story they're going to tell to you, and they know what environments you're going to be going into. They have more control over the situation, so they simply get to tell a more grounded and a better story to you. At the same time, those games are generally shorter too, so in that way, once again, they can put much more focus on the quality of the experience rather than the quantity of it all, and the fact that there need to be 1,000 missions and everything so that you can get those 50 hours out of your game, right? So that's what I love about them, first of all. Also, they are most of the time more polished. In an open world game, the environment will be much bigger, so you're going to be encountering bugs more, look at your typical Bethesda games or just any open world game that you've played, you'll see bugs way more frequently than in a single player linear type of game, because once again, they are shorter, they are more controlled, so the developer knows what environments you're going to be going to, what you're going to exactly be doing, and so they have more control to polish that experience and make sure that it is just smooth and perfect from beginning to end. And that's what I really like about those type of games too. Next up, and this might seem like a bit of a weird thing, I actually think, speaking about like the amount of hours you can get out of your video game, I think linear games have more replayability. It might sound weird because yes, in an open world game you usually, spend more time actually playing them, but I personally never replay an open world game. Like, that just doesn't happen, because I feel that once I get that 100% completion in an open world game, going back to it kind of feels like a chore, because at every point I want to make sure that I do all the side quests and I do all the other activities to make sure that my character is as strong as it can be. So I can actually do the main quest and stuff. And because the main quest doesn't really stand out as much either compared to the side activities, it's just not that fun to replay open world games to me. Whereas a great linear story-driven single-player game that takes 7 hours or something, I mean, there are plenty of examples of those games where I've replayed them countless times. And so, I really enjoy, once again, replaying them like I enjoy rewatching a movie at times. Last but not least, definitely, is of course that linear games also have more standout moments usually, big set pieces. In open world games, developers are way more restricted to like sticking to the core gameplay and stuff and making sure that everything once again fits in that open world. In a linear game, they can do anything they want to. They can make you go to a weird, crazy environment that you totally didn't expect. They can have crazy standout, massive set piece type moments that do not have to correspond with what the core gameplay is at all. So once again, there are just, you can name any type of course, example in those, but look at the, once again, look at the typical Naughty Dog game compared to any regular open world game. And yes, those stories do not compare in the slightest, because they're much better. They have much better standout moments. They're more emotional. They're more focused. Like, those games clearly have a big advantage. And if I look right now at, once again, the entire spectrum of games that's offered, I'm not saying that the linear single-player game is necessarily better than an open world game or than a multiplayer game. There are great examples there of games that I enjoy a lot in those genres. I loved playing Batman Arkham Knight. I loved playing Metal Gear Solid 5, Horizon this year, in open world games. As far as multiplayer goes, I like playing my Call of Duties and Battlefields and Overwatch, GTA Online, put so much time into Destiny, you know what I mean? But I think there needs to be a great balance. We need to have a bit of everything. And so the single player games right now, especially the linear ones, are just severely outnumbered by the massive open world and multiplayer games. And that saddens me to see. If I look right now at the games that I am legitimately excited for, just like a year ago, there was barely anything, I think, because these games were all announced pretty recently. Maybe, a year or two ago, there was barely anything really. So it's good to see at least that somewhat coming back, on the Sony side especially. But the games I'm looking forward to are God of War, obviously by Cory Barlog, because I just absolutely love the direction he's taking that into, with a more story-driven approach, with more focus on characters and stuff. Absolutely cannot wait for the new God of War. That game looks just fantastic to me. The other one would be Red Dead Redemption 2, which is an open world game, but it is an open world game where the focus is once again put on storytelling. Rockstar loves doing that, so that's great to see. Last of Us Part 2, don't need to say much more. Naughty Dog is like the prime example of the type of game that I love. And last but not least, we have Death Stranding, which once again is also looking to be actually an open world game, but we know Hideo Kojima is just a crazy kind of mastermind type of person, right? Who just loves doing weird shit in his games that we don't see coming. He loves storytelling nonetheless, especially with the previous games that he did before Metal Gear Solid 5, which was his first open world game actually. So we know that, all of these four games, what they have in common is the fact that they focus on more than just giving you a cool gameplay experience, but they also want to tell you a great story. And that's what I absolutely love to see. So generally, to close it all off, once again, I love all types of games really, and I would love to see all of them still being made. I just think that it's saddening to see that linear single player games are not being made as much anymore. And I would urge you that, if you love those games too, support them. Don't be hesitant to spend the money on it, of course, because it's very simple. If you spend more money, on open world games and on multiplayer games, then you should not be surprised that those games are going to be made more as well. So really, that's what it comes down to. Anyway, once again, good to see somebody like Cory Barlog speaking up about it, and this was pretty much what I wanted to share about it too with you. So let me know in the comments how you feel about this whole situation, and then for now, thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and hope to see you again next time.